Welcome back here on the lunch hour on the Believe YouTube channel. I'm Joe DeLeone. Every single Tuesday and Thursday at noon, we're talking draft with various guests. And today we've got a legend from the Carolina Panthers, former first round pick, Jonathan Stewart, also host of Believe in Panthers and Believe in Oregon. Jonathan, I want to jump in and talk a little bit about your path to the NFL. You were the 13th overall pick in the 2008 NFL draft. That was back in an era where running the football was definitely a focus, and you went on to have an awesome career with the Panthers. Before we talk a little bit about what it takes to be a first round running back, I just want to hear from your end. When you were getting drafted, did you know and feel pretty strong that you were going to go as early as you did?
That's a good question. I went through some hurdles early on in my NFL career with injuries. But post college, not post college, end of my college career, I
Mhm.
suffered some lower extremity injuries. And, you know, the talk, on the draft board was, oh, Jonathan Stewart, he was the first rounder. He's going to slip down to the second round. So, to be honest, because of my injuries, I was thinking I was going to be a second round, late second round draft pick, based off of what the experts were saying at the time,
Mm.
right? Because there was a lot of running backs that were kind of coming out of my class. I mean, you had Rashard Mendenhall, you had Chris Johnson, you had Darren McFadden, you had Tashard Choice, you had Matt Forte, Ray Rice. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a talented class there. And so, I just gave it up to obviously God's hands at that point. I'm sitting here in a walking boot post toe surgery and not really sure where I was going to land, but I knew what I could do, my potential, my contact balance, the things that, really spring, a running back, in a different trajectory when it comes to what he offers to a team. You know, avoiding that first hit and then still being able to get the next 5 yards for a first down, moving the chains, finding the rhythm. You want to find guys that are always falling forward. And I was one of those
Mm.
guys that wasn't just falling forward, but also trying to take the distance, and having the size and the capabilities to do so. So I knew what my strengths were, and I knew I was a first round draft pick, but my injuries actually told me otherwise. And listening to the naysayers and all that, I was like, man, whatever happens, happens. And the Carolina Panthers picked me up 13th pick, and they already had D'Angelo Williams, who was a
Right.
proven running back. He was, I watched him at Memphis, and I was like, man, he was a dog. And why are they picking me? But it just spoke to what the mentality of the Carolina Panthers were back then. It was run the ball and play defense. That was
Mhm.
John Fox through and through. That's the Carolina Panther way, and I think actually right now they're getting back to that.
Yeah, it's crazy how that pick happens, and you guys were such a prolific duo playing alongside one another. The one thing you brought up was with the expert opinion was I always wonder, being one of the people who puts out his opinions on the draft, and there just being now especially way more access to information and constant instant draft takes from multiple outlets. There's a lot more people doing frequent mock drafts on a daily basis. It's a emphasis point for a lot of outlets because they know it generates engagement. For the prospect perspective, how much were you paying attention to that? Like, how much were you maybe seeing a Mel Kiper big board or hearing him on ESPN, or maybe somebody sending you, oh, so and so thinks you're going to go to this team? How much did you pay attention to that in the lead up to that draft? And were you maybe trying to not get distracted by it?
Yeah, I was definitely trying not to read anything about it, and so I avoided it at all costs. It just so happens that sometimes you're in the lunchroom and you see it on TV, and that's what it
Right.
was back in 2008, 2007, 2008. So I was able to avoid it, at all cost. And I remember them saying, post surgery, oh, he was kind of already, a glider. They called me a glider in a sense of, my ability to run, right?
Mhm.
And that's the only thing that I actually heard negative about me. And it was only really the only time that I really watched TV while anyone was talking about me. These kids nowadays, you can't avoid it. It's everywhere. It's on your phones, it's on your friends' phones, it's on your parents' phones. You're constantly seeing, what you're being measured up against. You're constantly seeing the critique. You're constantly seeing these things. And to be honest, I'm glad I'm not being drafted during these times. I think the only thing that I'd be missing out on right now is the NIL money. But
That's definitely
to your
true.
point,
That's
though,
definitely
there's
true.
a lot that a lot of kids these days have to come up against mentally, as they prepare for, making their dreams come true, and
Mhm.
setting their families up for a substantially different future. What is your takes on, running backs, and just kind of, where things are starting to hopefully change for the running back group in itself? I feel like this draft holds, um, a very talented group in that retrospect in comparison to, previous years.
Yeah, I think that this running back class and like getting to know this group has been really interesting. It's incredibly unique because of how much top end talent there is, but also depth that there is in this class. Because you've got Ashton Genty and you've got Omarion Hampton. Hampton being maybe a first rounder, Ashton Genty has kind of solidified himself as a first round prospect. You could get somebody like Caleb Johnson or DJ Giddens in the second or third round that could go on to be 1,000-yard receiver. You could get somebody like Kyle Monangai on day 3, RJ Harvey that could be super productive as well. It's a weird year in 2025 that we're in this position that there's this many options. We
Yeah.
usually don't get this. And it works in the perfect time too, because in the past like 4 years or so, everybody's been talking about the downfall of running backs and how running backs are no longer as important as they once used to be. But we had 2 career years, prolific years from Saquon Barkley and from Derrick Henry. So the
Yeah.
fact that there's now this proof of like, hey, you can run the football and your team can be built around it, that is where success can be found. I think to build off of that, in the current version of the NFL, what do you think running backs need to do to be first round picks? Like what boxes do they need to check? Because I don't think that the guys that would typically go in the first round back in 2008, back in even 2015, I don't think that those guys are going in the first round anymore. They're turning into second round picks.
Yeah. I think what's happening is the team has to be built for,
Mm,
um, a generational, you know, talent. I think Saquon Barkley is a staple as far as what that looks like. Saquon Barkley, we knew out of the gate when he got drafted, he was going to be special. He got drafted to the New York Giants, and the New York Giants didn't have a nickel to save them, right? They had money, but they spent it in the wrong places. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but I think once you see a guy like Saquon Barkley go to the Philadelphia Eagles, where their mentality, under Kellen Moore was, hey, let's run the ball. We have a really good offensive line that has been playing together for a while, and they know how to move the chains. It's a mentality. It has to be, the first option. And when you add Saquon Barkley to that mix, now you have something special.
mm,
And so as far as the running back position goes and what you need to be a first round draft pick, um, you have to be a Swiss Army knife. I've been saying this all of Christian McCaffrey's career, Saquon Barkley's career. These guys can do absolutely any and everything in the backfield. It's changed completely from when I was drafted. I wasn't asked to be a guy that can line up in the slot, that can go out and catch screen passes and take it the distance. Now I was asked to move the chains, run load power, run zone, run outside zone. We'll toss it here and there. But it's gotten to a place where now you have to have the complete skill set.
mm.
You have to be able to block. You have to be able to make plays when blocking isn't, to your advantage. You have to have exceptional contact balance, and not just to move the chains, but to score touchdowns. We need you to be a home run threat at any point in the game. Saquon Barkley in the playoffs, he proved that. Oh, give me the first touch, take it to the house. Changes everything for a football team as far as what you can do and what you can't. And so a home run threat, the versatility of being able to do it as a receiver and as a runner. Vision, patience, not just hitting holes. I
Yeah.
hate watching hole runners. You know what I'm saying? Like guys that are just like, oh, if the hole's there, I'm gonna hit it. Well, my grandma can run this play if that's the case. I need you to be able to make something happen, when there's nothing there. When the play breaks down, what are you gonna do? We saw Saquon do that countless occasions for the New York Giants. So,
Mm.
those are the things. And obviously ball security. How many
I,
times you fumble the ball?
Right, ball security is very important. I feel pretty vindicated because pretty much everything you said is like the main focus points that I have with running back prospects. The vision and patience is important because it's like, do you take what's given or do you find where the bigger opportunity is? DJ Giddens is one of my favorite prospects from Kansas State at doing that because he's uber patient. Kind of reminds me of Le'Veon Bell, how he used to come up to the line of scrimmage and wait and see how things opened up. The blocking aspect is another thing that I've heard a ton from scouts and other media evaluators out there that say if you can't pass block, you're not going to find a role in the NFL. But the biggest part that I agree with you that I want to elaborate on, the best running back prospects should not be expected to fix a team's problems in 2025. They need to go to situations where they're going to take a team over the top, that they're
Yeah.
already in contention for the playoffs or we're in the playoffs and want to go from being good to being elite, to being a Super Bowl winner, just like the Eagles did this year. A
Yeah.
couple of guys
I was
you
just gonna
named,
say, Joe, who does
right?
that who are you talking about here, Joe? You talking about Philadelphia Eagles, baby.
Exactly. Well, exactly. If we look at all these examples, the Eagles win a Super Bowl and Saquon has his best season and one of the best season for a running back ever. Christian McCaffrey, Panthers, was good, goes to the 49ers, they go to Super Bowl. Leonard Fournette on the Jaguars, good player. They were good for a period of time. He wins the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers. It's a
Yeah.
different era.
Playoff
And
Lenny.
right, playoff Lenny was dominant. My final bit on this, I'm just so frustrated and tired of seeing running backs jump into positions. Being a Giants fan who was so disappointed that Saquon left and seeing him succeed elsewhere, I'm tired of seeing running backs be expected to do everything, that they're best off in these situations where they've already built a good roster, which is why like someone like Ashton Genty, I'd love to see him on the Cowboys or on the Bears instead of a team like the Raiders.
Yeah. You want these guys to go to programs that are built already to receive a generational type of talent. If you put them in if you put the analogy I have here is if you put a Porsche in the garage, he's only as good as the garage. You can go check out the garage and make sure the paint looks nice and the interior looks nice, but you're never going to see how fast it can go unless you open up the garage. And when I say open up the garage, you got to have those big fat uglies up there ready to put some hands on guys and put them on the ground. And so the Philadelphia Eagles, boom, they know how to do that and they want to do that. Carolina Panthers right now, they are building. They last year adding Damian and Robert
Mm-hmm.
Hunt, the two guards that they just got last year.
Mm-hmm.
It eliminated a lot of the issues that they ran into for the last 6 years up until last year. And now they can finally grow and build on top of that. You can have a quarterback that can feel protected, not just in pass blocking, but if you can run the ball, guess who that protects? The
Right.
quarterback. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? So we got options, baby. So it's definitely, I totally agree with you on the standpoint of let's not make this a pressurized situation for the running backs when they're drafted. If they get drafted to a Las Vegas Raiders, you're gonna get a Las Vegas Raiders outcome unless they fix their problems.
Yeah, exactly. I keep seeing Ashton Genty projected to go to the Raiders. A lot of people keep thinking that because Pete Carroll loved running the football that he's going to end up there. I don't know about you. Where do you think Ashton Genty would fit best? Because again, right situation, he plays into everything you talked about there, where he's got good contact balance, he's a willing blocker, and he's a home run threat. but he just needs to go to that team that's maybe already built their offensive line, and that he can be that extra piece to help them take that next step.
Yeah, I mean, you said it right out the gate. Dallas Cowboys, they ain't been doing nothing this offseason. I don't know what they waiting on, if they sitting on
No.
their hands, if they missing deadlines, are they sleepwalking. You better not be sleepwalking on draft day. You better be getting active. As like that should be the most active day that we've seen Dallas Cowboys in the last 10 years. Ashton Jeanty, in my opinion, is your numero uno. Like that's your guy. You need to make that your priority. Priority number one, get Ashton Jeanty, and he will thrive there because you have Dak Prescott. Dak was at his best when Ezekiel was out there killing people, moving the chains, eating. You know what I'm saying? So, and I think one of the things they got to make sure they do is keep an offensive line intact, so that way they can protect, right? So, they've had some woes this offseason having to sign one guy and let one guy go. So we got to make sure that they have the depth that will allow them to, have a sustainable season. So, but I think the GT, that would be a perfect situation for them.
Yeah, I love that pick. That's a great fit. One of the teams that they consistently compete with in their division, the New York Giants, who were once a Giant. I'm sadly a Giants fan, and I have been suffering through this awful offseason of just not knowing what the heck their solution is at quarterback. Not only are they basically out of the running with Cam Ward. No, I don't think a lot of people do. My roommate laughs at me every single day of how upset I get over this. But Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders seem to be off the table because that could be the 1-2 picks in this draft. Aaron Rodgers seems to be stringing them along, and now we're down to the options of Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston. I just want to get your gauge. What do you think the Giants should do? Like, what do you think is their best move going forward? Do they just bring in somebody like Jameis Winston and hope that they're still building this team? It's Joe Shane and Brian Daboll in 2026.
I mean, the situation is blasphemous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco. I'm not mad at Joe Flacco. To be honest, I like Joe.
Yeah.
He carries himself like a pro, and he don't make nothing a big deal. Okay, I'm just out here to toss around the pill, baby. And maybe you need some type of energy like that, right? And then you got Jameis Winston, who's obviously a locker room guy, a culture builder, and maybe you need a little bit of that. But I know one thing: Tommy DeVito. I mean, he might sell some jerseys, but he ain't.
Come on, man.
It's gonna be hard to win some games.
I hope he's not who they go to. And he seems like he's a local guy. He's a local guy. I'm a New Jersey guy. I love him for that. I'm an Italian, so I love that he's doing his bit. But no, he can't start.
Yeah,
he absolutely
exactly.
Can't.
And I mean, Jameis, he had 12 interceptions, last year, and in the stint that he played, and obviously that's the type of player you're going to get, right? Everybody talks about Brett Favre and how great he was. Brett Favre was throwing interceptions, all right, but he was also taking chances, and you just got to make sure you get the right guy that can just bridge the gap. Because if Shedeur and Cam are not there, you got to make sure you have a veteran that's in place that can at least build the culture in that locker room. And I think Jameis isn't all that bad of a. I mean, you might think it's laughable, but the locker room culture needs to be built. Right now, that's a losing atmosphere, and if you continue to just let that be and resonate, it's just going to grow like mold. And you do not want that as an organization. You don't want that as if you're a player. Players know who to follow. You know what I'm saying? They know what's real and what's not. And you can at least build some respect, in upper management by being intentional about what you're doing this offseason. Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if Rodgers is going to retire or what, but I mean, I think Aaron's the best situation. But if you're going to retire and you don't want to be there, You
Right.
don't want him there if you don't want to be there.
I actually kind of like Jameis as the best option. It's not the prettiest option. I think a lot of people just assume that he's not meant to start anymore, but he's at least willing to take some shots and
Hmm.
go after some big plays and chase some big stat lines and take those risks to hopefully pay off. It leads to a lot of interceptions, but I'd rather have that than the way that Russell Wilson played last year, where it felt like at times he was a little bit timid and his production
Yeah.
dropped off at the end of the year. To talk about the team that you spent most of your career with, the Carolina Panthers, I was, first of all, one of the people that was saying, be patient on Bryce Young. He's eventually going to figure it out. And at the end of the season, he started to look really good. So now they need to build around him. But what does that look like with a top 10 pick? Is there a player that you think in the first round that the Panthers like need to be their guy, or just maybe some prospects that would make you excited?
I mean, to be honest, there's a couple edge rushers that I think may be there.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that they are generational talent worthy first round picks? Not necessarily. Maybe this could be an opportunity to trade back and let one of the Michigan guys fall into our lap. I think there's a lot of guys that are kind of the same in this draft. I think, you hit it on the nail earlier. It's a weird 2025 is weird.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
like there's nothing that just jumps off the tape. I really like the young boy from Marshall,
Mike Green.
Mike Green.
Yeah, he's a good
Um,
player.
and I think he's a guy that if you put him in the right situation, he'll thrive.
Mhm.
And not just out the gate, but he'll be able to learn, become a pro, develop. We've gotten so far away from developing these guys and expecting them to just go in there into a pressure cooker and cook. You know what I'm saying? Like, y- let's develop. Let's you know let the seasoning into into the meat. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
there's just I think the Carolina Panthers have the right management and they're gonna do what's best for the organization. And I think they'll end up picking someone that I think people would not necessarily, think um or would have thought they would have picked.
Mhm.
But I definitely think defensively, there's some guys out there that can get the job done, especially when they're developed in the right spaces. And I think Carolina spent the free agency time making sure going into next season it doesn't
Mhm.
fall all the way onto the draft. Which in these certain teams they're basically just holding their hands, hoping for a draft pick to change the trajectory of their organization, which is terrible.
Yeah, the biggest thing that you brought up that I love at the jump there, I think that they are a trade back team because
Hmm.
right now you're starting to see what Bryce Young is starting to become, and he needs
Hmm.
a better supporting cast, and it's one of the weaker rosters in the NFL that has a lot of promise. There's some young guys that showed some promise, but this draft class is loaded with defensive
Yeah.
talent. It's a
Yeah.
deep class. It doesn't have a lot of premier guys that I think go on to be all pros or even have the potential to really be Hall of Famers, but there's a lot of guys that go on to be really good starters. So take advantage of that. Trade back instead of taking somebody in the top 10 and just sit and see who's available. Take advantage of the chance to grab multiple defensive tackles, multiple edge rushers, multiple corners, an offensive lineman on day two. There is a world for them, I think, to come out of this with a revamped young core that starts to improve down the stretch this upcoming season. But you brought up the best point that this Panthers team quietly has been one of the most improving over this offseason. I don't
Oh
think
yeah.
that they're getting enough love and recognition for how much better that they're getting and ultimately how much better Bryce Young could be in his third season.
Yeah. I mean, the addition to Bobby Brown the third, right? Of that defensive line,
Yeah.
you get a big boy that's gonna take on two blockers. And don't forget you got Derek Brown, who's
Yeah.
gonna line up right next to him. And you gotta at least put two on him. Okay. So it frees up a lot of space, a lot of opportunities for guys to fly around to the ball,
Mm.
especially in that 3-4 defense. And we added Trayvon Morig.
Yes.
Raider safety, right? So adding him to the mix, the guy that is an absolute run stopper. He wants to put his nose in there and get some things done. And then we had our rookie last year, Damani Richardson. He was basically flying all over the place on defense. So you bulk up the defensive line and you add depth, right? Because it's a long season. We need guys that can still come in there, give our guys a spell when needed, but still continue to do the things that you want to do. That is the imprint, the blueprint, the DNA of how you want to be as a defense. And it's fly around to the ball. When you have three interior guys that can like take up space and fill gaps and allow the linebackers to flow over the top and meet runners in the gaps and fly downhill, that's what you want on defense. You need guys that can just feel free to just make plays. When you're not sure or certain that up front they're going to get the job done, you kind of have to play limbo. You don't want to be playing limbo on defense.
Yeah, this Panthers team, though, lots of potential. They've got that young core on their defensive line, which has shown some promises you talked about there. That's going to be it from us, folks, here on the lunch hour talking draft. Make sure to go and check out Believe in Panthers, Believe in Oregon. Jonathan, appreciate it getting to catch up and talk some ball. I'm sure we'll get to talk a little bit more soon, and we'll see what the Panthers and Giants do during this draft class.
Yeah, man. Good luck for you and Giants Nation over there. Stay strong.
Trying to. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you later.